Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Could I ask all the members to take their seats, please, and for the clerk to call the roll?
John Donovan. Here. Michael Hurley. Here. Jay Lipp. Gaylord Meyer. Here. Eric Sunman. Here. Pete Ambrose. Here. Catherine Burstein. Here. Nathaniel Schindler. Here. Jeff Steele. Keith Varian. Ed Bateson. Here. Laura Devlin. Here. Hank Ferentz. Here. Dave McKenzie. Here. Mary McCullough. Here. Heather Dean. Present. Joe DiMartino. Here. Bill Gerber. Here. Joe Palmer. Here. Cindy Waldron. Here. Bill D'Amica. Here. Josh Garskoff. Here. Lauren O'Brien. Here. Ruth Smay. Here. Carol Way. Here. Julie Gottlieb. Here. Alan Marks. Here. Sheila Marmion. Here. Jay Wolk. Here. Liz Zezima. Here. Jen Hochberg. Here. Kevin Hopkins. Here. Eric Newman. Here. Phil Pierce. Here. Hal Schwartz. Here. Kathy Braun. Here. Alex Durrell. Here. Jason Lee. Here. Tom McCarthy. Here. Jeff Milarano. Here. Pam Iacono. Here. Ellen Jacob. Here. Lauren McArdle. Here. Carol Pontrelli. Here. Chris Timniak. Here. Brian Caffarelli. Brian Farnan. Here. Ray Newberger. Here. Bill Perugini. Here. Bruce Ryan. Here.
Thank you. Could I all ask you to stand, face the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I ask you to stay standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. Well, welcome everybody to the February meeting of the RTM. Item number 2 on the call is the minutes. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes as presented? Representative Hurley.
Michael Hurley, RTM District 1. I'd like to make an amendment to the minutes on page 4. It should read Michael Hurley. District 1 said that the follow-up memo provided by Ann Leffert can be a model for the BOE and the town to utilize going forward when they need to respond to specific RTM questions that are asked at the subcommittee level.
Thank you. Any other adjustments? Representative Iacono.
Did you leave it on? Oh. Pamela Iacono, District 9. I'd like to make a change on page 1. It should read, Pamela Iacono, District 9, asked if a list of the long-term leases could be supplied going forward and was told that due to the large volume, those leases could be obtained by individual requests from the town clerk or internal auditor. She asked that going forward a cover letter be provided explaining what the short-term lease report is and why it is provided to the RTM. Iacono also asked going forward, where applicable, that square footage be provided as part of the report.
Thank you. Would you provide those? Oh, thank you very much. Any further amendments to the minutes? Seeing none, can I have a show of hands to approve the minutes as amended? Thank you. Next item is to hear a report from the Blight Officer, Mr. Tom Connolly. I'm sorry, Mr. Connolly, I'm sorry, I missed Mr. Bateson. Yes, we did. Yeah. We're fine. Thank you. Representative Bateson.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'd like to make a motion to take our items out of order and hear item number 9, the appointment of Harry French at this time.
I have a second to that. Representative Garskoff. All in favor of taking the items out of order, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, so the next item we will hear is item number 9, to hear, consider, and act upon the following appointment to the Harbor Management Commission as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Harry B. French of 78 Sasko Hill Road, term November 2013 to 2017. And I see that Mr. French is in the audience tonight, and he was able to attend our combined Wednesday night meeting. If Mr. French would like to rise and join us at the microphone in case any members have questions. Mr. French, I just want to repeat again, thank you very much for your offer of service to the Commission. Do I have any questions for Mr. French? Well, I have a question for you, Mr. French, which is not why I asked you to come and join us. Can you tell us if you've ever served on any other town bodies or committees before?
I don't believe so.
And what prompted you to offer your services now?
Pat Carroll asked me if I had an interest in Southport Harbor.
Pat Carroll, that's enough. What do you see as the most important issue facing the harbor right now?
There are issues with regard to the channel. There still needs to be some dredging done, and it would be nice to return the channel to what it was originally. Sorry. It would be nice to return the channel to its original width and depth, actually, as it has been many years ago. Over the years, it has slowly encroached on the channel itself and made it very difficult for boats passing each other.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any further questions from the body? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, we're going to go to a vote to accept Mr. French as a member of the Harbor Management Commission. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Congratulations, Mr. French. Okay, Mr. Connolly. Would you like to stand here? Would it be more comfortable for you?
Oh, yes, I would feel more important. I'll do it right here. This is fine. No. Only teasing you now. So many friendly faces here. Pardon me. Thank you again for moving the meeting to this month. As you know, I just took over the position and had no real feel of what I had to do with the Blight meeting. So I do thank you again. And I'll try to make this as brief as possible, unless you have questions, and I hope you don't. There are presently 10 homes or properties on the Blight list right now. What we've decided to do is start fresh, start clean, send out everybody new notifications. So in 60 days, they'll see us before our meeting. We'll assess from that. We've already done assessments on the property. We want to hear from each property owner and find out what they actually intend to do. So we want to start fresh with this, simply because I'm the new Blight officer. I really want to get the feeling of what these properties intend to do with their neighborhoods, to be quite honest with you. So we're not going to fine anybody until after this 60 days. We're going to try to be a little more lenient on property owners, residential property owners. I think it's most important that we get these places cleaned up, but not at a huge expense to people that cannot afford it. So we're looking at a little compassion here. There's approximately 5 home properties on the condemnation. Again, we've sent out letters to them. Several of those properties that I'm sure you want to hear about are signing this week new letters of ownership, and they'll be coming down, dropping the buildings, and new properties will be built on those sites, some of the commercial sites. Hopefully that's enough information for you. I just want to let you know also that there's some new improvements that we're talking about with our Blight, our commission. And I would actually like it if the first selectman would maybe bring some of that to light for you, because we brought it through with the first town attorney, he's agreed, and if Mr. Tetro agrees, we'd like to do a couple of minor changes to the, not the ordinance, but the way we do business. So if Mr. Tetro wouldn't mind giving some information.
Tom, thank you. I just wanted to take a moment and point out that Tom, Health Director Sands Cleary, Fire Marshal Bill Kessler came to me and said they wanted, each wanted to be a blight officer. And that would give us 3. And what that would let them do is process the blights and follow up, process the blighted properties, follow up with inspections on a much more timely basis. And I just wanted to point out that this is an example of 3 of our department managers coming together for looking for ways we can improve the process without additional funding, without changing the ordinance, but to make an improvement for our residents and to help enforce the ordinance that this body put together on that. So I wanted to compliment Tom as well as Sands and Bill, and if you see them during the budget process, if you take time to do the same, that would be great. So Tom, thank you and your 2 associates for putting that together.
And thank you, Mr. Tetro. Yes. Yes, always ready for questions.
Congratulations on your building
Thank
department.
you, thank you.
Jesus. Ed Bates in District 3, thank you. Quick thing, I guess I'm going to go to the first selectman. I just heard this about the blight officer. I don't have the town code in front of me, but I thought that the blight officer was, by definition, your office. It seems like it's not. Maybe somebody knows, but it seems like it might need a revision of the code so that we can expand those powers to the individuals that you had just mentioned.
Well, I think that as Tom mentioned, we did take it to the town attorney just to confirm. So if you look at the wording of the ordinance, it does say blight officer. But there's nothing we can find in either state statute or the town code that says that can't be more than 1 person. Though, to your point, it would be very helpful when you look at revising the ordinance to, in fact, just make it so the first selectman can appoint more than 1 blight officer as need be from time to time.
Okay, I'm going to say, in principle, I don't disagree with the path you're going on, but I think until the Blight Committee or the RTM agrees with you on that and does its own research, that we would like to keep that position as it's been traditionally done until the Blight. Is that agreeable? Because I'm kind of not sure. I thought that it was always, by definition, his position.
Yeah, and Ed, what I said is the town attorney has ruled that it's okay. All right, now if you have a real problem with that and would like would like us not to do that, I'm also happy to do that too. I don't mean to
Okay.
make an issue out of this, but the town attorney has ruled it's okay. If you're going to look at the blight ordinance, it would be nice to clarify that and just make it so that the first selectman can appoint more than 1, so it's absolutely clear.
Yes.
But there is no impediment to that. But if that causes this body a big problem, we'll be happy to hold up along those lines.
Okay, I'll check it on our end too. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Wonderful.
Any questions from the public, or comments from the public for Mr. Connolly? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next up is item number 4, Representative Gottlieb. The next item is item number 4, which is to hear a report from the Nonprofit Committee.
I'm not going to touch that. Julie Gottlieb, District 6. I'm also a member of the Not-for-Profit Committee. I'd like to move that we move this item to a date certain next month. Our chairman is out of the country, and we would like him to be here when we make that presentation.
Representative Schwartz, second. Thank you very much. All in favor of postponing this item till our next meeting, March 24th, say, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you very much. Next item, we will hear a report from the Joint Retirement Investment Board, and our presenter is Mr. Brian Fahey. Welcome, Mr. Fahey. Would you be more comfortable here? Either way. We have a lot of papers.
I like the cheat sheet here at the pictures.
He's good.
Good evening. I am Brian Vahey. I'm from the town's pension board, and I am here to report out per the ordinance that was established, I believe, 4 years ago, that within 3 months of the end of the fiscal year, we are to report out on certain items to the RTM. So that would be why the performance report you have is dated June 30th, 2013, when we're now here in February. But so as far as the performance of the fund and all that, I'd just like to also refresh the body on why we do this. Like I said, it was an ordinance, and maybe I can explain a little bit about what the pension boards are and what they do. And for reference, you have a document that's investment policy and guidelines. It was in your packet. It has a little piece on this as well in the introduction on page 3. But essentially, we have 3 buckets of money that we oversee. There's the OPEB, which is other pension employee benefits. It's a very small fund. Then there's the police and fire, and then there are town employees. Those are the 3 different pensions. They each have their own board that's set up according to the charter and the rules around that. But then together we operate as a joint investment board. So we come together and we make all the investment decisions for the 3 funds together. And in that role, we are the fiduciaries for the assets. So our primary responsibility is to act on behalf of those assets so that they may be in place to pay out the liabilities, which would be the pensions as they come due in the future. And also one of the rules, or one of the obligations of the smaller boards is also to approve pensions as they come up with folks retiring. So that's the background on what we do. And before you, we have a performance report and the investment policy guidelines, which are both required by the ordinance to be presented, as well as a statement of expenses, which is on the 3rd page of the investment review. So just real quickly, I'll go over the performance highlights. You can see on the first page of the performance page that the assets stood as of June 30th at $314 million, and the 2, this would be encompasses like I said, the police and fire and the employees. First page of the Callan report. And the number I'm referencing is that they're at the bottom left, $314 million. Okay. $314 million, bottom left. This page also shows our asset allocation targets as well as where they stand. And just to give you a little insight on why there are any deviations from the target, we run a little high on our allocation to domestic equities, and we still are today. The reason for that being is if you look down to the private equity, which is the 5th line item, you'll see that one's really low. Private equity takes a long time to fund. We have a 5% allocation, and we fund it as we get capital calls from the funds themselves, so it's not something we can just put the money in and it goes up today. So as we wait for that to be funded, the money is parked in domestic equity, which is its nearest proxy. The next page shows all the different managers we have selected and their performance over the time periods and their relative benchmarks. We've been pretty happy with all of our managers. We've made some changes in this fiscal year to narrow down the fixed income managers we have. You'll see we just have 2. We used to have 3. We also shifted our domestic equity. We used to have 4 managers. We replaced 2 of them with an S&P 500 index because we did not feel we were getting value for our fees in having a manager for large cap equities. And I believe I believe we also funded a commodities mandate since the last time someone stood before you. The third page has a summary of all the performance numbers. And so you would look at the last 12 months would be your fiscal year effective return. It's 12.64%, outperforming the benchmark of 10.17 by about 250 basis points. The last 60-month number obviously incorporates both, let's see, it's 2013. Yeah, that just picks up the financial crisis numbers. Last page shows expenses. The biggest line item would be obviously the payments out, which is about 5%, and then taxes. So then I'd like to shift your attention to the investment policy and guidelines. And I would like to apologize. This was evidently a snafu. When this got sent out the first time, I pointed out that we had made amendments to this document and during the year twice. And this is still the original version from 2011. So when the chief fiscal officer gets here, I might have a word with him. Essentially, the main changes we made were in the amount of money that can be allocated to a manager because we went down to 2 fixed income managers, we were bumping up against our maximum allocation to one manager. So we adjusted the language that it could be 15% or 2/3 of the target allocation, whichever is greater. So before it was just 15%. So now it's 15%, or in the case it's for us 2/3 of the 30% fixed income is 20% essentially. So the other change we made was to reflect that variance you see in the private equity, domestic equity. We changed the range to make sure we weren't going to get out of target variances on that. And that would be about it. Are there any questions?
Representative Hurley.
Michael Hurley, District 1. Thank you, obviously, for coming in. And the performances look pretty good over the past few years. I guess what would be helpful to me would be in terms of fixed income. I mean, obviously, it's no surprise that interest rates are going to be headed up soon. And I know it's difficult to address a fixed income portfolio, but could you just talk a little bit about, if you're allowed to, I'm not sure if you are in this setting, talk a little bit about how you're approaching the fixed income portfolio, and if we're moving into a higher interest rate environment. I mean, you're looking at like high yield liquid alternative funds, which I see to be written about quite a bit.
That's a very good question. I'll just preface it with saying that our investment allocations, we're not market timers. We're strictly, we run on a pure strategic overlay. We don't do tactical trading. You know, we meet monthly, but we're not, you know, I believe that interest rates are headed up as well, you know, on a personal basis, and I maybe you query the board and see what we all think. But at the same time, I don't know when they're going to be headed higher, and so we're not into the, you know, jumping in and out of fixed income. So what I can say on a more general term is the two managers we have, neither of them are what I call, you know, pocket indexers, meaning they are both active managers. They have a slightly shorter duration, which should ease things, and also you'll see the Montgomery Fellows. They not only do they not, you know, strictly follow the Barclays aggregate, but they also have a shorter duration. They do that through allocations to some of the asset classes you just asked about. They have some levered loans and stuff like that in there. So that's how they choose to manage their duration exposure. But we're not too far away from the Barclays Ag, and you know, nor should we be. You know, we had a fantastic run in bonds for the past decade, and you know, we had benefited from it then. We're going to have some rough periods going forward, but we're going to stick to this roughly 70-30 split if you look at that from equities to fixed income. So,
Thank you.
Joe Palmer, District 4. On the expenses page, the payments to participants, I was just curious to know, and you might not know this off the top of your head, but how many participants are from the town employee side does this constitute, and then fire and police as well?
Yeah, I don't have those numbers. I am on the employee board, so I know we had a fair amount come through in the past year, but I have no idea how many of the ones were fire and police.
Okay, then we can follow up later then. Great, thank you.
Any other questions from the body? Any comments from the public? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Next item on the agenda is to hear an update from the Benfield Building Committee, and Mr. Bradley is here, the chairman of the committee, to make his presentation.
Is ready to go here? I guess it is. Well, we just got started, so I have a script. Otherwise, I could just speak about what is becoming a great committee. My name is Jim Bradley. I'm the chairman of the, lucky enough to be the chairman of the Penfield Building Committee. And thank you for this opportunity to provide an update to the RTM, and I'm sure we're going to be back, or I'm going to be back, or the committee will be back to keep you posted about what we're doing. The Board of Selectmen have appointed and the RTM have confirmed an excellent, dedicated, and representative committee, definitely up to the challenge. We understand our charge. We meet twice a month, and we are determined to overcome and resolve the challenges that are impacting this important repair project. The Penfield Building Committee is more than a typical oversight committee, as I'm sure you know. There are complex issues we face must be resolved prior to final design or engineering regarding any type of repair program. I think overseeing construction is going to be the easy part. I thought it might be helpful if I repeated my remarks at the beginning of the first meeting last month. While we report to the Board of Selectmen, we are aware of our obligations to the public, the RTM, and the Board of Finance. Our work, deliberations, and final recommendations will be the product of an open, transparent, and well-communicated process. While striving to stick to our charge, we will endeavor to seek out and listen to key constituencies and respect differing opinions. Our meetings and deliberations will be inclusive, informal, open, but structured and well-managed. Our goal is an outcome that is best for our town, our fellow citizens, and Fairfield taxpayers. We have met five times to date, including our organizational and indoctrination meeting with the first selectman and representative department heads on December 12th. The December 12th meeting included election of officers and confirmation of our meeting dates for 2014. On December 20th, the committee met at Penfield and heard a presentation from Joe Michelangelo of DPW, and that followed by a tour of the building and the foundations below. On January 9th, our first regularly scheduled committee meeting, we covered several organizational issues, including meeting duration, public comment period, distribution of communications, and the creation of a website for the committee. In addition, we were presented with an initial draft of a process flow chart, and I just put it up there so as people walked in, they could see it. I don't think you want to be dragged through it. But it is a flow chart that describes, like, from the very beginning when the building was built all the way through to where we want to be at the very end. There are like 28 different boxes. And it is a way in the very beginning to help the committee understand that the depth and breadth of what we're trying to do. It kind of puts it in a linear context because, frankly, design, construction is all linear. If you get lousy grades as a freshman, you never get 3.8 or 4.0 as a senior. So that's the way unfortunately, that's the way it works. In addition, the committee also received a briefing on the status of the insurance claim and negotiations. We received that in executive session. And during our first meeting in January, the committee raised concerns regarding the fact that the existing facility fire detection devices and automatic monitoring were disabled, and that the building was not as secure as it could be regarding unauthorized access. On our January 23rd meeting, our meeting was devoted to a presentation from Roberts Associates Coastal Engineers. The presentation included the impact of coastal storms, local coastline and site-specific issues related to Sandy, as well as FEMA design standards, building floor elevations, and elevation requirements, and how coastal structures could be protected. During the meeting, we also heard from Joe Michelangelo regarding the available project historical data, as well as his commitment to provide us support from his department. Joe also reported on his plan of action regarding activating the fire and intrusion alarms and the installation of a more permanent and secure construction fence. Our regularly scheduled February 13th meeting was canceled due to weather, and in order to maintain continuity and momentum, a special meeting was called and held on February 20th. Last Thursday, the committee heard a presentation by J.M. Albane, the structural engineering firm that investigated the storm damage and provided recommendations after both Irene and Sandy. The presentation included an overview of damage, typical foundation design related to soil-bearing capacities, FEMA design requirements, as well as the extent of the building and foundation repairs. There was an internal discussion regarding repair option, including raising and moving the existing building directly north into the parking area. You may recall that was one of the original options. Our next committee meeting is scheduled for Thursday, February 27th, this week, and the agenda includes a presentation by DPW and engineering regarding the building storm damage, local flooding and drainage issues, pavilion building and site impact on flooding, as well as the installation and protection offered by the timber bulkhead. The committee is also expecting to receive geotechnical information regarding the soil conditions below the existing building foundations. I suspect that next month the committee will continue to discuss storm-related flooding and including any impact or role played by the pavilion site features and topography. We look forward to inviting and hearing from flood and erosion as well as conservation. In closing, I realize that everyone is anxious for answers. Understanding, balancing the complicated interrelationships between and among the various issues and factors impacting the project repair options is and will continue to be a challenge. As a committee, we need to understand more about the project history, the site conditions, the quality of foundation elements and soil-bearing capacity below, storm damage and future storm protection, cost and risk, FEMA flood zone elevations and design requirements, and FEMA reconstruction cost thresholds, as well as the building and foundation basic repairability. So thank you, and that's about where we are. We just got started, and we'll be back before this body as needed. We have it included, at least 3 stops included in our flow chart as we follow it the best we can. I'd be happy to address any questions, although, again, we're just getting started. Good committee. I think we're on the right track. There's a lot that has to be done, frankly. Nobody wants to make any more mistakes.
Representative Kathy Braun.
I just have one follow-up question. There's been a little bit of confusion or discussion informally about whether or not your committee is focusing on flood and the impacts of flood on the local neighborhood. And I've heard so many different stories. If you could just explain that. Is that a priority with your committee?
Well, our priority is basically to solve the problem. I think the confusion comes because early on I made a comment that we couldn't address the coastal issues and the flooding issues related to the whole town area. But certainly, we will end up discussing, getting into and discussing and looking at flooding issues that may have been exacerbated, or a flow that might have been diverted because of where where the pavilion is and how it was constructed and how it's protected. But as far as going down the street or up the creek, no. We're going to hear about it because Joe's going to provide us with a presentation, and I'm sure Flood and Erosion will provide us with a presentation on it. But our goal is the building and bringing it back for Fairfield.
Just one follow-up there.
Sure.
I'm assuming then that if the results of all the investigations and studies being done indicate that the way it was constructed or anything constructed afterwards, that I keep hearing about bulkheads, that could have possibly contributed to flooding, then that will obviously be addressed as part of your mission.
Yes, that's the reason for my comments about the fact that the building, the site, and the site features are all part of rebuilding the building or repairing the building. We want to get to the bottom of that particular issue with that particular building on that particular site on that particular section of the beach. I was just hoping not to be dragged all the way down to Norwalk.
Representative Donovan.
Thank you for your question.
John Donovan, District 1. Thank you very much for doing. I would not want that job. What do you think the ETA is for when you'll have different options, where you'll understand what are the costs of each option, and then will there be a public forum where you get feedback from the public on each of those options? And sorry, if that's on that map, I didn't see it when I came in.
We are going to provide a public forum once we get to that particular point, because I don't think there's possibly any other way to get the results of our study across and give people an opportunity in the town to see what the options are. Timeline, really difficult. I think we've got to get through at least March. I think the idea that you could go in and rev that building up for this summer is probably very, very optimistic. We have reports from the engineer regarding the utilities in the walls, the electrical and so forth, when the floors basically sagged and separated from the walls. Although the gap is not particularly large, it did put tension on the wires in the walls, and the utilities are all shut off. So I think it would be pretty difficult and maybe time-consuming and unnecessarily expensive to address, to get back in any portion of that building this summer. This is a involved situation. We are balancing the FEMA threshold funding requirements, the emerging insurance negotiations, whether or not that building can be fixed and then protected. We have this option of raising it up. If we go too far, we have the option of moving it, which doesn't seem to have much traction. So we'll be back here. I'll be back here. The committee will be back here anytime you want to explain. You disappeared, but that's where I'm at.
Someone once told me don't stand in front of that camera. Thank you very much.
Okay.
That answers the question.
Representative Pirelli. Go ahead.
Bill Perugini, District 10 again. Thank you for your service to our town in this very vital capacity. You mentioned the flood mitigation considerations. How closely do you intend to work with the Flood and Erosion Committee to address some of those concerns and integrate those flood mitigation efforts in the overall plan?
Well, certainly if they're related to the site and the project, we're going to be great listeners and we're going to participate in a discussion. Our goal would be to get them or a representative or representatives in one or two of our March meetings. Same with conservation, because I know Tom Stanky has got a lot of interest along the beach there. So yeah, we definitely plan to. We've already communicated we need to work together.
Great, thank you.
I saw Representative Gottlieb and Farnan. Thank you.
Julie Gottlieb, District 6. You mentioned a website. Is there a separate website, or should people still be accessing information and it's on the poster?
Our esteemed secretary is standing right here.
Yeah, we're working on...
Bill, come to the microphone, would you please? Thank you.
Yes, I've been working with the town to update the website. Right now, we do have a page which lists the documents that we have, but the town is doing a revamp on some of their websites, and we're going to be one of the first ones that gets upgraded to a point where we can have all the documents there coded that we review, as well as information on our minutes, agendas, communications. I'm going to try and get those up there as well, emails that we get, so that they're public record anyway, so that they'll be available. But it's a work in progress right now. We're supposed to be getting an update the end of February, which we're getting close to in terms of when we can launch that, and right now it's just in the design stage.
Representative Farnan?
Brian Farnan, District 10. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Being from District 10, the beach area, I just want to echo the importance of the flood mitigation. It's something that I know is very important to my constituency. Secondly, I just wanted to ask, when you were considering options, will one of those options potentially be renting out the space to a established restaurant? That is something that I have spoken to some of my constituencies, and they were excited about that potential option.
We haven't discussed that, and I'm sure if we get far enough down the road to come up with an option to bring the building back to Fairfield, and there might be options like that, certainly there's going to be an opportunity, because we're going to want to know as we go forward, confirm how the building's being used, and whether or not if it comes back, it's got to come back as a fully functioning, usable facility. So if you have a suggestion like that, you could put it in our way, or go directly over to talk to Jerry about it when we're at that point.
Okay. Yeah, I would just say thank you, because I think that's, if you were to go the restaurant route, that would probably be helpful in the planning stage to, it would have to be built out a certain way to make it conducive to a successful establishment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Representative Jacob.
Ellen Jacob, District 9. Just had a question. I'm getting a little confused about whether options are going to be considered and then presented at a public hearing, or are you going to have a public hearing to collect and then explore options?
We have a long way to go. I'm not exactly sure in what order, but I will say that we first have to solve the problem about bringing the building back to its previous condition, or the next step beyond that, if you know the FEMA rules, and I don't know them that well, it becomes very expensive because the building would have to be raised. My tendency to think right now is the committee will form up one or two options, present them, and we'll talk with the first selectman, board of selectmen, as how they would be presented. They are to go to the public in an open forum to talk about the options. I think that we'll find, knowing a little bit about this business, it's going to roll out to one or two solutions. It's not going to be like, why don't we just move it up the street, down the street, out on Long Island Sound, across the road, whatever. I think it's going to come down to repairability, or raising it to FEMA, the problem with one of the basic issues we're going to end up wrestling with is the FEMA flood zone designation, as you may all be aware, changed, and now we're in a V high velocity zone, and that zone goes directly across the street, the other side of the road, so it includes the building, the parking lot, and everything. So we're now in a V zone, so that kind of means the building has to go up higher, and their design standards have to be adhered to that are pretty tough. So we're not in a position yet to really understand. The options are really going to be driven more by money and risk than they are going to be. I guess what I'm trying to say is we're not going to have half a dozen options. As we get through this study, it's going to get, just talking my opinion, it's going to get pretty narrow. One, maybe two. Driven by the money, driven by FEMA requirements.
But public input comes into it at what stage? After you've decided what the options should be, or it's not before you decide what the options should be?
I'd like to let the committee discuss that because it's a very good question. And I'm not comfortable we're far enough along yet to figure out whether we would say to everybody, what do you think we ought to do, or whether we should know what we're doing and then provide the public an opportunity to go over it with us.
Thank you.
Representative Ryan.
Hi, Bruce Ryan, District 10. Jim, thanks for your service here. Obviously, there's a lot of questions, and there was a meeting 6 months ago over what the public did think about what should be done there. And I think there's a very varied opinions. One of the things that I'm concerned about, and I see this, there's always been talk about the insurance and what it'll cover, and having looked at your minutes, I think Roberge Associates is sort of leaning toward recommending that you rebuild and replace what's there. And this issue of the zone now being a V zone versus an A zone will require different insurances, or I wonder if you could comment on how you would see us reimbursed for the damages if we were to decide to elevate the building, which was one of the suggestions that the preliminary structural engineers did, versus rebuilding it and keeping it the same height, how that might affect the insurance reimbursement for what was done. Because I think under different scenarios, we would receive different things or not be able to insure if we didn't do things. And that's, I guess, there's a lot of confusion, at least in my mind, how that would work. I don't, one of you comment on
My answer is a lot shorter than your question. I don't know.
Okay.
We're not there yet. We are about ready to be brought into the discussion with the insurance company. We're having a separate presentation on FEMA and the cost thresholds, which I'm sure you're aware of. I think we really have to figure out what we've got and what we can do, and then figure out what the options are. I'm not sure the options will roll out exactly the way they are in the final report. And I'm not sure exactly how the funding is going to roll out, to be honest, until we really honestly get into it. I'm no criticism of the final report, but we're finding that we want to know a lot more than we're reading. But when I do know, I'll be here.
Well, I guess it was relayed to us at one point that we have a $500,000 deductible, and that ultimately maybe the insurance would be the out-of-pocket expense for the taxpayers of Fairfield. I assume that's if we just rebuild what's there. If we do something different, it may be a whole nother story. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Any further questions for Mr. Bradley? Seeing none, comments from the public? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Bradley.
Thank you.
It's very informative. The next item, item number 8, is to hear a report from the Fair TV Committee. Mr. Kennelly.
Good evening. I'm Jim Kennelly. I'm the chairman of the Fair TV Operational Committee. Next week marks the fifth anniversary of my taking over the chairmanship of the Fair TV Committee. It has been a long and winding road from those days back in March of 2009, when Fair TV was essentially a bulky used DVD player attached to a Cablevision provided head end in our IT department, putting up very dated student productions and a handful of meetings that didn't have very good sound quality. In those years, we have transformed Fair TV into a multi-platform broadcast system that is available to you on Cablevision of Southern Connecticut, ATT Uverse, and also on the internet via Peg Central at Fair TV On Demand. We not only provide taped broadcast, we also provide live broadcast of the Board of Finance, the Board of Education, the Board of Selectmen. And proceedings like these when they are held in this building, or other proceedings when they are held in the Sullivan Independence Hall. So I can report to you tonight, at the risk of somehow this haunting me later, mission accomplished. The work of Fair TV is done in terms of the operational committee. In fact, really, with ATT Uverse signing off on wanting to use our feed because their customers were so frustrated with not having Fair TV, at the end of that hookup was completed at the end of 2012, the start of 2013. Really, the operational work of the committee was complete. The committee acted as an oversight entity as well as the system grew. But there really is a need now, and the operational committee has spent the last year looking at developing rules of the road for a permanent Fair TV commission, akin to what you would have to oversee something that would be the equivalent of a town resource like the golf course, but needs to be treated with the respect and independence of an ethics commission. So what you've been provided with is the product of the Fair TV committee, which is a bipartisan group that was appointed by the Board of Selectmen to look at what would be an appropriate broad rules of the road going forward for a commission that you, as the RTM passing an ordinance, could adopt, and also, more importantly, that you would endorse an independent commission, one that spells out what the clear mission of the broadcast system is, so that over time, what we have at Fair TV is just that, fair TV, as opposed to what it could become if we don't provide the kind of oversight required, and that is, I very much hope not, some sort of political football. So I'd like to direct you to the materials that were provided in your packet related to this report. The operational committee worked out this language. We studied the town charter. We looked at past practice of other towns, but because Fair TV is so unique compared to just about any other type of entity like this, it was really created in the digital age when most of the previous government or education access channels in the state of Connecticut predate not just the YouTube or the internet, but pretty much predate, you know, the DVD, the CD. They were really all a creation of the 1980s. So we wanted rules of the road that really reflected what is the current identity and the current environment, video environment in this community and in the state of Connecticut, and also you know, what we face in terms of the current marketplace, which is no longer a monopoly dominated one. So to go through this briefly, it's the pieces here that you really need to focus on right now, at least, so you can have questions on other stuff, are the 3 pages that look at the Fair TV Commission as suggested for consideration. We'd ask that you, as it says here, legal standing, we ask that you consider making a Fair TV Commission part of the town code via ordinance. The Fair TV Commission would be sanctioned to represent the town in any and all grant processes to fund the Fair TV broadcast system. Needless to say, that is the operational work of the commission. All of these kinds of grant requests always require the signature, the sign-off of the chief executive of the town. So, you know, that either can be added, but I don't believe in other cases that's been required. But if you want to do that, you could. The Fair TV Commission shall have 5 members nominated by unanimous vote of the Board of Selectmen. Here again, we're looking to find a way to ensure that the individuals chosen are bipartisan choices, that these are individuals that all parties can be comfortable with, and that the commission nominees be confirmed by a majority vote of the representative town meeting. I will tell you that that approach is one that is used for the town ethics committee, and we believe, we do believe that the Fair TV Commission, should you adopt and create one, adopt the ordinance and create one down the line, should be treated in that way, something unique, very different from just about any other commission other than perhaps the Ethics Commission, because its role is to be a watchdog. There can be no authority, no town body, no individual who can stand, hopefully, above the system in being able to cover it. Once that happens, you have what has unfortunately happened time and time again in states, in communities across the tri-state area, where over time the channel becomes more and more the creature of either the executive branch or particularly ambitious or motivated political folks, and that would be just, in my view, a terrible shame. Meetings, here you can see this is essentially stuff that is in line with the town charter. But the duties and powers of the proposed commission provide oversight for the Fair TV broadcast system, and this just defines what the elements of the system are. Most of you are probably familiar with those. Ensuring efficient and cost-effective broadcast operations, requiring delivery of broadcast content that is comprised primarily of coverage of the lead executive, legislative, educational, financial, and land use elected entities within the town of Fairfield. And secondarily, nonpartisan town and public schools related events and programs produced by the Fair TV broadcast system. Ensuring public support for town-specific access in Fairfield and in the region by working with local groups and regional entities committed to quality delivery of those services. Commending all materials deemed appropriate for the public access channel. Fair TV does not provide public access. That is provided by Soundview Community Media, the regional provider who was stripped by an act of the legislature of its authority over our E and G channels for very poor performance. Developing as a thorough and understanding as their backgrounds allow of the workings of Fair TV operations. That goes on, talks a little bit about that. The commission has also asked, it would also appoint and set terms of employment and compensation for the Fair TV broadcast system manager and all video producers and interns in a manner consistent with requirements of fairness expressed in the town charter of Fairfield in Article 11, Section 4. They would have the commission under Section 3, and this is really crucial. This right here, Item 3, is perhaps the centerpiece of this proposed ordinance for you to consider. To approve the monthly primary and secondary broadcast content schedule. Primary schedule herein defined as gavel-to-gavel meetings of the following governmental bodies of the town of Fairfield: the representative town meeting, the Board of Education, the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the Town Plan and Zoning Commission. Secondary schedule herein defined as town government or public schools affiliated events such as graduations, ceremonies, parades, school sports, and channel-appropriate, nonpartisan informational programming originated by the Fair TV broadcast system only, such as how a government entity works sessions, interview programming limited to channel subject area, coverage of debates, lectures, and other town-sponsored cultural programming. The primary schedule must be completely funded, assigned, and scheduled before any budgeting for coverage of secondary programming is executed. No elected official may produce, host, or appear as a guest in secondary scheduled programming. And I'll stop right there, because you can almost feel the wheels screeching as I read that to you aloud. The committee discussed this for month after month. And I would say to you, first, there's no doubt that government access channels all over the place are filthy with, Senator Joe and how he loves you, and Representative Millicent and how she wants to do better for you. My question to you in this body is this. I look around this room and I see some champions of the taxpayer, and I see some champions and advocates for education. And I ask you, is this how you would want your taxpayer dollars to be spent? Would this be how you want the money that is paid to Fair TV to go toward? Because I assure you, having produced many of these kinds of programs, they will end up on the air. And there will be fighting about who gets to have these shows up on the air. After much discussion, the committee settled on this absolute bright line. This idea that you as elected officials, me as an elected official, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm sure all fascinated by the workings of the TPZ, I happen to be a commissioner, the exposure you receive, that all of us receive as elected officials on Fair TV, ought to be enough for us, many of us maybe perhaps hopefully politically active, want to get out there, get their name out there and all the rest. This, in my view, and in the view of the committee, which unanimously supported this, this ordinance language for you, this ought to be enough. I'm sure there are many of you in this room who have great concern about a lot of different local issues. But if Fair TV needs to create programming to deal with those different issues, we have wonderful experts in town government who can explain that. There is no doubt that hosting programs of one kind or another doesn't take up all that much time. But what it does do is it offers a pressure on the committee or commission, should it be created, on the video producers, on our system manager, to try their very best to, answer requests for these kinds of things. And once a few people have them, more people and more people will seek them out. Oh, really? Okay. There's about another half page more, but honestly what remains is mostly how the system, the ordinance should, how the commission should be kind of in line with town policy. What I would ask you to do is read over this material. We're seeking sponsors to move this forward, but at the end of the day, the crucial principles that are enumerated here are an independent commission, free of influence, and one that has defined in town statute what can be broadcast to stop the channels from slipping away and becoming less and less what we want them to be, and that is fair television. Thanks.
Any questions? Representative Marmion and Representative Dean.
Thank you for that report. I'm just curious in terms of the language that no elected official may produce, host, or appear as a guest in secondary scheduled programming. Is any of this driven by the committee's concern about funding dollars or resources? Because you talked about, some of your concerns about
That's a great question.
making choices, but how does that funding work?
That's a great question, Representative Marmion. Thank you very much. Yeah, it is. As you may well know from the budget process, Fair TV only gets about $50,000 a year. Okay, and that is a combined amount that comes from a grant we get from the CAC2 and a grant we get from the town. Just to cover our primary schedule, and that are those are the core meetings of those bodies that are mentioned here in the ordinance, and then also to add as well the many budget meetings that I'm sure you've seen our cameras cover over the years, exhausts probably close to 90% of our funds.
Okay, then a follow-up question to that. If there was a public official who wanted to fund their own program, would you allow that, or what's the precedent? Is that currently being done, or how does that work?
Thanks very much again for that question. Well, that's one of the things. We batted this around because why not have not allow those who could pay to go ahead and, purchase time from our video producers? They'd certainly be glad to get the extra work. But our concern is that also something that's appropriate? Will elected officials who have means be able to have greater access to Fair TV than elected officials who do not? Is that what we want? So again, we felt that was not appropriate.
Okay, I have another question, which is that you mentioned we have the government channel, we have education, there's a third channel, I'm not sure what that's called, but that's under SoundView's control.
Yes.
Would a public official be able to go to SoundView and say, I want to do an interview program on whatever it may be? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, I should say this. We live in a time that's very different. First off, you can go to SoundView. Anybody can get a show on public access. It's worth noting that the GATV, that's the Government Access Television Institute, nationally respected, has time and time again addressed this issue. And they've said a government access channel is not a public access channel. People do not have First Amendment rights to appear on a government channel, just as none of us can submit a show to NBC and expect it to air in prime time. The same is true of government access channel. So what I guess I'm saying to you is there is a venue for this. It is the public access channel, where any individual under the old system, of government access and public access and education access can find their way onto these channels. But it would be on Channel 88. You would have to go deal with SoundView. Now, the committee is not averse to legislation at the state level that might allow Fairfield to take control of its public access channel. We have no problem with that. But we're asking you to write the rules of the road for the education and government channel. And it's crucial that the integrity of these channels be maintained. One last point, Representative Marmion, to beg your indulgence. Not only could a public official use the public access channel, but also keep in mind that today the rules for access channels, whether they be government, education, or public, were written well before the advent of the internet or YouTube or things like that. Today we have inexpensive digital video. It is cheap and easy for any of us to create videos, create a channel on YouTube for free, and to then let folks know that if we have some point of view or a show we want to produce, great, let's do that. But I would say to you that clearly the public good of protecting the integrity of these channels far outweighs any kind of concerns about whether or not any one of us in our elected capacity wants to get our name out and, have a show. We can have a show on the internet, have a channel on the YouTube with tons of our programming. So both with the existing circumstances, existing regulatory framework with public access and also with the internet, any elected official certainly could move ahead with programming if they wanted it. And that doesn't mean to talk about links to things like government-provided websites where you can have your own page and point to those other kinds of videos and stuff. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Dean.
Representative Dean, District 4, thank you very much for coming forward and giving us a very detailed report on this. And I also want to thank Jerry Spino, who has been behind the camera, behind the scenes, correcting us and getting us to speak into microphones and making sure we have batteries and so on and so forth. So thank you, Jerry, for that. My question is, you want to bring an ordinance forward, which is what this body is designed to do. Do you have a time? I have a couple of questions, and they might get a little clouded, so you'll have to forgive me on this, because it's been a while since we put ordinances through. So I'm very pleased about us being put to work for that. You have an ordinance in mind. Do you have a time frame of when you think it's going to come before LNA to be considered?
Well, I would tell you that I had hoped to bring it to LNA, and your very, very, very understanding moderator was very helpful in the process. However, because of the snowstorms, I was just buried under work, and I'm afraid that, the process really has begun by me introducing this to all of you. So I guess I would anticipate in the discussions I have had that once we have sponsorship, and we gladly welcome sponsorship from both sides of the aisle, that once we have sponsorship, I would be happy to attend meetings of LNA and also the appropriate subject area committee to discuss this. And other than the independence of the commission and the definite need to have a bright line about what specifically the channels will produce, so that years from now, when my baby is gone, I know that it still is okay, it's still being protected by the rule of law. I think we can discuss all sorts of things. 3 members, 7 members, whatever. But yes.
All right, well, you actually brought me to my next question, which is creating such a committee to review the wording of an ordinance. And I have a couple of questions that I'm concerned about that would not be able to be answered, I don't believe, right now, but we're going to give it a try. On page, well, it's not numbered, but number 3, it has I'm sorry, number 2 is appoint and set terms of employment and compensation for the Fair TV. And, you know, I'm feeling a little sensitive about that. I think it's a valuable service that we're providing to the residents of Fairfield and those outside of Fairfield. But I'm very conscious about budgets and how we're going to pay this and compensation and benefits and whatnot. And I think that this is something that needs to be addressed by a committee when an ordinance is put forward, and how are we going to pay this bill, and how long are we going to be paying this bill? And
well,
so
your question is an excellent one, Representative Dean. Just so you know, we had some of this discussion when we met with the town council, Mr. Lessner, who also raised with us concerns, and also did the first selectman, about what about this idea of creating an employee. Now, Fair TV has operated, just so you're aware and the body is aware, Fair TV has operated on a very, very lean and light system operation. And by that I mean, I acted as the volunteer system manager for nearly 3 years. Today that work is done by Jerry Spino in addition to his duties covering all these meetings, and he is assisted by just 1 or 2 other college students. All of them work on a 1099 basis. Now, our concern is, and it is one worth discussing in committee and getting a good legal advice, is at what point does an individual work to the level that it's impossible for them not to be considered an employee under the state code if they're a municipal employee. And that is something we can discuss and figure out what makes sense. Okay. But I would say that the current framework, which allows the staffers who do the work for Fair TV, has a benefit in that the coverage is primarily in the evening. And while we look forward to a long, long reign by Jerry, we also have to write rules when he's gone, because to be perfectly honest with you, Jerry and I have been in this, he's been in it even earlier than me, but we've been together for 6 years on this fight. And Jerry does so much more in terms of the coverage and the work he does compared to what he has paid. It is laughable. But going forward, it is worth noting that a 1099 scheme for many young people who might come into a position like this, say a new college graduate with excellent technical skills, they might be well comfortable with the idea of acting as a consultant as opposed to a town employee with certain specific civil service or other duties.
Well, certainly we need to look into that. And really, I'm not an accountant, and I certainly don't understand the tax code, and I think that we need to address this very carefully and very cautiously to make sure that we're doing everything as well. So thank you.
Complete agreement.
Representative Braun. And then I'm going to see if we have any more questions, because the meat of the meeting is still coming up.
Through you, Ms. Moderator, to Jim. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Jim.
Quick question. Some of the secondary ones, I think you could specifically cover, instead of only public events, things like the Conservation Commission or other commissions that you probably don't have the funding to put in the primary. So I would just recommend that you add other government bodies to that hold committee or commission meetings, maybe the Penfield Committee, if there's funding in the budget to cover it. I would put that ahead of some of the other events. Thank you.
If I could just respond to that observation, which is an excellent one. I did that actually out of respect for my concerns about those folks worried about the budget, because it was sort of like an open door to us asking for more. Frankly, the more that the town is willing to invest in Fair TV, the more meetings it'll be able to cover. But that's good.
Any further questions from the body? Any comments from the public? Welcome.
Is this the one I use? Thank you, Madam Moderator. I think I haven't been before your body in many, many years. I'm Representative Kim Fawcett from the 133rd District, and it's a pleasure to join you all this evening. 8 years ago, when I was first elected to the legislature, our town had no community access television. But what you all don't realize is we were part of a region, a 6-town region, the only region in the state of Connecticut that was being denied access to community access television. So Fair TV that you enjoy today, that was taking place a decade ago in every other town in Connecticut and actually across the country. And so I got elected and I started asking questions, and we had a fledgling organization called Fair TV, which was really just some really passionate people who knew what we all were being denied, but they had no access to money, and they were being denied access to the wavelengths or the channels. So we teamed up with them, and I asked a lot of questions, and many of you maybe know the story that I proposed legislation, drafted it, advocated for it, and ultimately championed legislation that got through the Connecticut General Assembly and did 2 very specific things. First of all, it said that our 6-town region had the absolute right to access the education and the government channel that we now today use. We were being denied access to those channels, and we now have it. The second thing that that legislation did is it redirected $100,000 a year to the Cable Advisory Council. And Fairfield resident and Cable Advisory Council member Pam Jones is here with me tonight to talk about her role. When that money went to the Cable Advisory Council, and this is a 6-region board, it's of all volunteers that we appoint. So Fairfield has several.
Point of information, Madam Moderator, it's 9:30. We have a huge agenda with capital reporting.
I'll sum it up. I'll sum up. But if you open the conversation, I think you have to at least allow us to present a counter position. I'm happy to sum up my.
Just briefly, please.
Yeah, and so what we actually did was we breathed life into the Fair TV organization, and everything that has happened in the past 5 or 6 years, and the growth of Fair TV and all of the meetings that have been covered have been able to happen because there's money there to help it. Now, we're at the point where we have to create the organization in a more structured way. That's what Mr. Kennelly and the Fair TV Committee is bringing to you. And that's a great thing, because we're solidifying the Fair TV Commission. But we're going backwards by some of the regulations that are being presented to you. If you approve, if you approve and you don't make amendment to what's being presented to you, we will once again.
Representative Fawcett, we have nothing other than a report from the committee. We're not taking any action on the report this evening.
But the
And
committee
we will have the opportunity to do
presentation
that when
presented erroneous information. And we will once again be the only town in the state of Connecticut and the only region in the country denying citizens access to public access and community television. I think it's a really important conversation to have.
Thank you.
Do I have a minute or two?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm Pamela Jones. I'm a former member of Fair TV. I'm outside counsel to NBC News, A&E Television Networks, and I'm a member of the Area 2 Advisory Council. The reason that's important is because the Advisory Council provides 50% of the Fair TV budget. So I'm here to just make a statement that the sentence banning elected officials from producing, hosting, or appearing as guests in secondary scheduled programming is, in my opinion, unconstitutional. I think it's very serious. I think that public officials are... With all due respect, may I finish? I asked the moderator if I had a minute or two. She said yes. That's all right. Never mind.
Ms. Jones, if you wish to, please finish.
I just am urging that you undertake some serious legal review of this sentence. I think it's illegal. Thank you.
Duly noted. Thank you. Any further public comment? Seeing none, I wish. Great, thanks, Mr. Kennelly.
Thank you so much.
All right, moving on. Item 8, to hear an update from the RTM Redistricting Committee. And who's going to make the presentation for that? Representative Bateson? Representative Schwartz?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Oh, no, buddy. Oh, no. Come on. Ed Bates in District 3. Myself and Hal Schwartz will give you guys an update briefly. We populated the redistricting committee this evening, and Hal, who are your people? I'm sorry.
Representative Alan Marks and Representative Phil Pierce.
On the Republican side, we have Representative Iacono and Representative Timniak. Hal and I have been working since we got elected in November to try and get this committee formed and establish some guidelines. There's a lot of history behind this coming from the court decision Slane versus Fairfield. We wanted to take into consideration all the parameters of that decision and try and establish a sound basis going forward. And I believe with Hal's cooperation, we've done that. There's a couple of things that the body should be aware of. There was several contentious items at the SLMC level that we tried to hammer out, and I think we did a good job doing that. I think the committee is poised in a good position. There's just something that this body should know, that one of the items that we can't, it would be, once we laid out the timeline after the holidays of how this would proceed, there was really no way we could effectuate this ordinance by the 2014 elections, given the clear guidance that was provided in the court's decision. There's a lot of timing issues that have to be resolved by this body. And to accommodate those, we laid out the calendar, and we went to the Secretary of State's office and we confirmed with the town attorney that in order to get an ordinance on the books by November, the November election, we would have to have an ordinance probably by next month. Hal and I kind of thought that might not be doable, so we've loosened up the timeline and we're shooting for the 2015 elections. We're not happy with that, but we do have certain parameters that we want to go to, that we have to address. There's another issue that came up, and we should all be clear, all of us in this room, the RTM, that the night that the redistricting ordinance comes before us as proposed by the redistricting committee, there's a ruling that has been issued by the town attorney that he says we need to abide by, and his is based on his interpretation of Slane v. Fairfield, whereby when this ordinance comes out of the redistricting committee and goes to the floor of the RTM, any amendments that we propose to that ordinance by this body have to be referred back to the redistricting committee for their consideration and approval. Personally, I disagree with this. I think that the legislative authority of this body trumps that, but he has ruled on that. That's something that we all need to know. So what we've built into the process is that the night that the redistricting ordinance comes before this body, we are going to convene the redistricting committee at the same time. And we've put certain language in place that will hopefully allow this to occur. We will propose, if there's an amendment proposed, it will then be forwarded back to the redistricting committee, which in all practicality will be convening that night. They will act on it, refer it back to the RTM. It's a little complicated, but I want all of us to know that that's the process that's going to occur. If there are any objections, consider yourself advised that that's the way the process is going to be worked that night. It's going to be difficult, but we all have to be on the same page that that's the way it's going to proceed. That's the only two things that I had. Hal, if you had anything else? Okay, and you know, the committee will go forward from there, and hopefully we can get something done. Thank you.
All right. Any questions for Representative Bateson and Schwartz? Okay. Thank you very much. Well, next item on the agenda, item number 10. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Finance. Resolved that the bond resolution entitled, "A Resolution Appropriating a Sum Not to Exceed $2,130,000 for the costs of certain non-recurring capital projects and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation consisting of 4 pages, be and hereby is approved." Now, Representative Hurley.
Michael Hurley, RTM District 1. I think we all can agree that DPW and obviously the fire department have done a great job. I think we all can agree that you do need to make the proper types of investments in equipment. One thing that came up in the committee meetings was, are these items truly capital items or operating items? And I know Mr. Mayor, is he here?
Yes, he is.
He spoke to sort of the administration's perspective on why these items should be bonded. And I think it would be helpful if he could just take 30 seconds and go through that again for the body. Or Mr. Tetro, either or.
Simply, has everybody had a chance to see the bonding guidelines that we have? Okay, so these items fall within the bonding guidelines, so they're eligible to be bonded. If you look at our practice over the last 10 or 15 years, sometimes these items have been bonded, sometimes some of them have come within the operating budget. So we've done both.
Okay, during the subcommittee meetings, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Mayor, but I think he was making the point, because Representative Bateson said, we thought some of these items, based on what we heard from the Board of Finance, would be more appropriate to be in the operating budget. And I think what Mr. Mayor said, to the effect was, if you're a taxpayer in town for 3 or 4 years, or maybe 5 years, and a dump truck has a life of 25 to 30 years, why should you, as a taxpayer, be responsible for paying that full amount up front? And as such, he thought it was more appropriate for it to be bonded. But maybe he could sort of clarify if that's his, or is it different, the perspective?
No, you asked why we could, and I just pointed out that we've done it both ways, and it's allowable within our bonding guidelines. So I'm not...
I guess I'm just trying to understand philosophically the...
Oh, philosophically?
Philosophically, maybe I chose the wrong word.
We
I
have
apologize.
underfunded DPW capital for 10 or 15 years. All right? If you look at the average age of the DPW fleet, anybody remember how much of it's past its useful life? Yeah, something like 70% is past that. All right? So at some point, and the point I made to the Board of Finance, this is not about any one group or any one body or any one person or anyone anything doing. We kind of are where we are. We got here by progressively cutting and not approving DPW, and a lot of times it didn't get to the RTM. Sometimes it did get to the RTM. It got cut at every step along the way over the last 10 or 15 years. This problem didn't crop up in the last 2 years. This problem didn't crop up in the last 5 years. This has been an ongoing issue. What you have before you is, in essence, a bridge. What I've asked Joe Michelangelo to do is put together a plan for equipment replacement for the DPW department. All right. But given the magnitude of the issue, we wanted to get started. This was a way to do that, in essence, provide a bridge for us to that plan. All right, so that plan will come back, and we'll also provide some recommended funding along with that. The simplest thing to do at some point is certainly get it into the operating budget, but one of my questions is how far behind are we, and how much catch-up do we have to do, and what does that catch-up look like, and what is the impact on the tax rates? And that's what we'll be looking at and coming back before the bodies to see.
Okay. I do think that DPW does a great job, and these are important, pieces of equipment that they need. But I guess I struggle with the concept of, bonding these, in their entirety. I mean, it's a sort of, buy now, pay later mentality. And I think as such, DPW should be required to, put a certain percentage, sort of like when you're buying a car, to put sort of a down payment on each of these items.
Yeah. And we'll have that discussion. The point of this proposal is literally to try to bridge to get there. We need something put together for this. We have underfunded DPW capital for way too long. And the telling piece is just in the age of that equipment. If you take a look at the average age of those trucks, et cetera, that are on there, our DPW group doesn't have the tools. And if we're going to have our employees be as productive as they can, we actually need the tools in operation, not in the repair shop.
I couldn't agree with you more. Now, can we, maybe you could answer this, I don't see the town attorney being here, can we reduce the overall size of the bond resolution by 9.364%, which would be 10% of the items for DPW, and then have DPW be responsible for making up that 10% from their operating budget?
You can reduce the resolution. That's kind of how we got in this situation, by cutting DPW capital requests. However, at this point, DPW can't increase their budget for the year. That would be something that would have to happen by a vote of either the Board of Selectmen or Board of Finance as part of our budget process.
I thought at the committee meeting, Mr. Mayor said, from an accounting standpoint, that could be done. He said it wouldn't technically be easy from sort of an accounting standpoint, but, by all means, if you wanted to, reduce certain items by a dollar amount and then request that they be put into the operating budget.
Yeah, you can request everything you want, but this body cannot increase the budget. So at some point, it's going to have to be the Board of Selectmen or Board of Finance that votes to increase the budget to include those items.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just first say, by process, we don't even have a motion on the floor to discuss this item. And if we want to have a motion on the floor, I'll please put forward a motion to discuss. Now remember, we either vote a motion to discuss the full amount, or we divide so you can discuss individual items. Representative Iacono. Representative Iacono has made a motion to discuss, seconded by Representative Schwartz. So now we are going to discuss the main motion on the floor, which is to appropriate a sum not to exceed the $2.13 million. Yes.
Pamela Iacono, District 9. I'm not at all happy that we have to bond all of these trucks. I understand how we got here, why we got here. To me, those were short-term fixes to alleviate a tax burden, and now we are paying for it today, and that does not make me happy. But at the same time, when I look at a report that was put together by DPW where we have all of these ridiculously aging trucks, I don't know how, in good conscience, for the citizens of Fairfield, any of us can turn this down. It's actually kind of ridiculous knowing that we're a AAA rated town that we have equipment this old. That being said, I am willing to do this as a one-off catch-up replacement, get a new fleet, and get moving. But I want, as a representative, and I know there are others who feel the same way I do, a long-term replacement plan for these things. And I know the first selectman made mention of it, but for so many years, the school district was put under major pressure to put together a long-term facilities plan and to have it on the record. And then when they come forward with their proposals, they have a supplement to that long-term plan, what those items are, what they look for, what the cost estimates are, how that fits into their long-term plan, and they explain it. The fire department came forward and did the exact same thing. We need I think, for every single department that wants to come forward with some kind of request for all of us to understand how that fits in. And if I don't see that for me going forward as a representative of the people of the town of Fairfield, I will not vote to approve these types of things without understanding what the future implications are and what the plan is. But in the meantime, I will support this as a one-off replacement program to get us caught up, to get us on level ground, and then going forward, I think that we should use the school district as a model for what we need to be doing and planning, and I thank the fire department for coming forward with this information.
Questions, Representative McKenzie.
David McKenzie, District 3. Pam, I agree with you, and I apologize that I wasn't able to go to the committee meetings, but I was ready the night of the storm, but not the night afterwards. So maybe these questions were asked before, but I look at, should I assume that since I don't see any trucks on the waterfall chart, that hasn't been done, but they will be coming?
First, let me just remind you, we are only discussing the $2.13 million. And yes, there are components that make up those, but we chose not to go that route. You have a good question. I threw you to the first selectman. Maybe he can answer your question in regards to...
Am I clear on that? In other words, we have a lot of old trucks. So we're going to have more trucks required in the future. Is it just that they've been left off that waterfall chart because we haven't specified it yet?
Yeah. I'm going to ask Mr. Mayor to come up and address the specific waterfall question. However, the whole purpose of having Mr. Michelangelo put together that plan so we can see exactly how far behind we are, how much catch-up we have to do, and have a plan for getting our equipment back on a timely basis of replacement.
I agree, and it's clear from the sheet. Just when I looked at the detail where it laid it out year by year, there were no other trucks. It was only this year. So I wondered if it meant that more trucks are coming, they just haven't been put in.
Yeah. Bob, can you address what's on the waterfall chart currently?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here, of course. As the first selectman indicated, and as you've seen from the fire department, it is the administration, the town's intent to have a replacement plan for all major equipment in town. That has been completed by the fire department. It is in progress in the Department of Public Works. What's in the waterfall chart currently are the trucks that are on this authorization only. As Mr. Chuttrell indicated earlier, when the DTW's plan is put together, a decision will have to be made as to whether or not going forward, obviously Ms. Iacono would prefer it to all be in operations. Some people might prefer it to be bonded. There are certainly philosophical and intellectual reasons and arguments on both sides of the question. So when that replacement plan is put together, then that discussion will be held, and then based upon that discussion, future trucks either will or will not be in operations and or the waterfall.
Thank you. Just one more question. It doesn't show on the charts utilization on the trucks, and I wondered if consideration has been made as to whether or not to outsource some of the work done by DPW if utilization is inadequate.
I'm going to ask Joe or Scott to come up and address it with respect to these specific pieces of equipment, or perhaps others. But I do want to point out to everybody that our Public Works Department has done one of the best jobs of outsourcing and using subcontractors in order to provide a cost-effective service to the town of any department we have. So, Joe?
Okay. As far as construction work, Public Works will always have the base amount of work which we program for. And at any given time, there's going to be peaks in that baseline. So that's where we try to utilize subcontractors, private contractors to do work, and we have contractors doing all kinds of work for us, from drainage to asphalt paving to the sidewalk work. Additionally, in the storm, so generally most storms, we run our 27 large trucks, which you see here, both the 6-wheelers and the 10-wheelers. Basically, we have 27 frontline trucks. The other ones we have are basically in the weeds. They're 20 years old. They only get pulled out of service for extreme emergencies when we have breakdowns. But so every storm, most storms, whether it's from 3 to 10 inches, is when we use our 27 trucks. When we do have a extreme storm, we do have contractors on bid, and we have probably like somewhere between 3 and 5 that we call in. And instead of our 27 routes, we sort of chip away and we play zone defense, so we blanket the town with whatever's needed, whether we need 30 or 32. So that's how we do use subcontractors for snow plowing. But we're in the snow plowing business, so it's good to handle the peaks, but for our normal routine that we're in, it's effective to have a dedicated town crew and dedicated town equipment to handle it.
Thank you.
Representative Donovan.
Thank you, John Donovan, District 1. And thanks, Joe, for the presentation before. I thought it was great. Just trying to understand this capital, and in the context of this $2.1 million, looking at the budget, last year it was like $7 or $8 million in capital. This budget request is $28 million, so it's gone up like 3.5 times. In that context, it was 9.52% of the budget in 2013, 9.56% in 2014. I'm hearing something about like you can't go over 10% or something to keep AAA. What are the, do we think that percentage is going up? Is it going to go up above 10%? Is that an issue? Is there a strategy to say we want to make sure that percentage stays below a certain number?
I think we may have a terminology issue. I believe you're referring to debt service?
Correct.
Okay, so it's not the capital here that we're just talking about on this resolution.
Correct. So I guess the question to put it into this resolution is we're spending $2.1 million. There's lots of other requests coming through. Will this mean that that debt service is going up?
When you say lots of other requests coming through, what are you referring to?
When you shared the waterfall, I see $28 million in capital requests in that waterfall for this year. Excuse me, for the next year.
Okay, those are not capital, actually they may be, but let's come back to that. What the waterfall does, what the power of that is, it basically takes every project that we are contemplating on the Board of Ed side and on the town side. Both big capital projects, a la Riverfield School, the little building committee, as well as smaller projects that we look at for the non-recurring revenue, or non-recurring capital, and lays those all out so that whenever we make a decision on those, and when we make it, we can see what the impact is at the far end of the waterfall chart on the debt service.
Yep.
So we take a look at that at each piece. The reason you get a waterfall chart along with this is so we can monitor that. So from that standpoint, the goal, we've had debt service increasing dramatically over the past 10, 15 years. We have gotten that a bit more under control, and the goal is to kind of manage that to a level basis and hopefully get that moving in the other direction.
So I guess to be specific, it's up to 9.56%. Capital next year looks to be going up by about 3.5 times, of which this $2.1 million is a part of it. What number will that go up to in terms of debt service? And then is that a risk to the town in terms of pushing us above that 10% threshold?
Yeah, the 10% threshold is something that we manage to. It is not a hard and fast rule from the rating agencies, and if you go back a few years, you will see that we were above that 10% in terms of what our debt service number would be. As we project it going forward, we see it staying well below the 10%, but I'm going to ask Mr. Mayor for some help on the waterfall numbers, because he's a little bit closer to those than I am in terms of the specifics.
The current, and I'm not sure where the 9% number comes, the current percentage of the general fund of debt service is 8.53%. The debt service number, I believe, in the projected budget going forward is pretty much unchanged. So with the budget going up, that percentage will go down. The range that the rating agencies look for that still is AAA rating is 10 to 15%. We are on the low side of most municipalities with respect to our debt service to general fund expenditures.
So if that number's at 8, what was the number?
8.53, I think.
853. Spending $28 million in the next year, what will that number go up to?
No, I think, well, I think the numbers, actually going forward, given our current numbers, that number actually goes down. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but the trend going forward is down. But I think I don't know if you have the drivers with you, but
Yeah.
I think the debt service for, what is the debt service? Is it up 1 million or is it?
It's pretty much flat.
It's pretty much
going
flat,
into
that's
this
what I
year.
thought.
But what you're asking is what the waterfall chart answers. So my suggestion would be, why don't we have you sit down with Mr. Mayor so you can get your questions answered. But your question is exactly what the waterfall chart answers. Given what you're spending each year, what does it eventually do to debt service out here? And
Yeah, I
that's
don't-
also because we may approve something right now, as we did, say, with the Ward roof, we approved $10 million, but that's spread over 4 years. So just because we approve it doesn't mean we're bonding it. I mean, so the waterfall chart kind of watches us play that out.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, given that the debt service is flat, the budget is going to go up a little bit, and that number is going to actually come down.
Great. And so understanding that is great. That's helpful. I totally support that type of approach. It sounds like you're also doing the same thing in terms of the waterfall plan. It would be great when all this information comes in for us to be able to see some of that information in Excel with actually what's the expected life of different assets, so that as we look through, I mean, the information Joe shared with the average age and the 70% has passed its life, it'd be great to say, look, we want an average age of X, and how do we stay at around that? So in future years, we don't have to rehash all this.
No, I believe that's the exact point of asking Joe to put together a plan that addresses that. We have two issues. One is if we were starting from zero with all new equipment, kind of how we'd roll it in, but we're not. We're starting with really old equipment. So one of the questions will be, how do we catch up to continually bring that average age down, and what can we live with as we do that?
And I guess just the slight difference is within the context of the entire town as opposed to DBW, because it's difficult just for me personally to look and say, okay, I'm going to buy a new car, but maybe my garage is leaking and maybe my roof is leaking, and then how do I put that into context?
Again, that's the waterfall chart. What the plan does for DPW is what the fire plan does for fire. What I've asked Joe to put together a sidewalk maintenance plan too. If those of you have walked around for a bit, you've noticed our sidewalks are showing their age. And we are talking about putting together a sidewalk maintenance program, much like our road maintenance program, where we do so much per year. But where that all comes together is in the waterfall chart. That's where the Board of Ed and the town comes together, in the waterfall chart.
Excellent. So I can get that in Excel.
As Representative Iacona mentioned, the Board of Ed has had a facility plan for a number of years. It was only recently that we attached dollar amounts to those, and only last year that we put it in a waterfall chart, tied it off to the town, and put everything together. For the first time in the last 12 months, you're looking at a waterfall chart that actually ties off to annual debt service. As I mentioned earlier, we were able to use that in the spring when we looked at the Roger Ludlow building project getting bigger than we'd planned, and that let us move other projects out. So we made sure that our annual debt service numbers did not go up, even though we were moving the project along and replanning it, if you will. So that's the magic, if you
Sounds
will,
perfect.
of
I'll follow up with
waterfall
Mr.
chart.
Mayor
So
on.
I think it's a phenomenal tool, and I think you want to sit down with Bob for a little bit and see how that works.
Thank
But
you.
that's why we also present it along with every capital project that comes through, so you can see any updates or changes.
Representative Bateson.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 3. I want to follow up on a couple things I heard. I appreciate that the DPW, they've demonstrated a need for these vehicles. I do support them. What I'm struggling with personally is how we're funding them. To Mr. Tetro, or maybe Joe, you mentioned a bridge to the plan. Is the plan available now for the fleet replenishment?
No, it's not.
Okay. Now,
And partially that, Mr. Bateson, is that we haven't had a plan in place, and that's why when we sat down and were reviewing the needs of DPW and the age of the fleet, we identified we did need a plan. That's why I asked Joe to put together, but we still had to take steps this year, take action this year to kind of improve the situation out there.
Okay. One of the other things that concerns me is going forward, you had said you really haven't addressed how you want to fund, an acquisition of a truck, let's say, in the next budget year. I've heard differing things. I think at subcommittee I heard Mr. Mayor allude to the fact that since bonding these vehicles, heavy-duty vehicles, is acceptable under the policy established by the BOF, that it can be done. The sentiment I heard expressed at the Board of Finance was this was a one-off. I'd like to hear from you, the executive level, okay, if you get this, what are you going to do in 15, 16 if we need a 10-wheel truck?
Yeah. Let's be clear. What I said at the Board of Finance meeting, and what I'll say again tonight, is that we need that plan. We'll come back with a proposal for what we're looking for, how to fund those. How much of that we believe we can put in the operating budget. And if we need to, if based on the amount of catch-up, if we need a bonding proposal, we'll bring that through too at that time.
So you're saying that this catch-up that's proposed, this $1.4 million in DPW vehicles, this catch-up does not solve the immediate needs?
This is a bridge to the plan. Without the plan, I don't know how far behind we are. You certainly can look at the age of the fleet and realize this isn't going to catch us all up. Our average age of the fleet is not going to go down dramatically when we're done funding this.
But if you use the term plan, it implies a measured approach to solving the problem, and that would mean, to me, this is a one-off. I mean, in 15, 16, I'm going to see a 10-wheel truck. I'm not going to see it bonded. I don't see this as solving the problem by bonding these vehicles, going out into the future. That's what I'm looking for, a commitment from the administration that's not the policy going forward.
Yeah. You've got two things. One, the final decision rests with this body. So what happens is always in control of this body, as well as the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen before it
Not
gets here.
necessarily. I don't have the power to put money into a budget.
Correct.
All I can do is approve an appropriation that's been given to me. So it's not up to this body.
Except in the case of the appeal. But in terms of the question you have, in terms of can you vote down something that's bonded that you don't want to see bonded, you absolutely have the control in this body to do that. You're asking me for what my plan is, and I'm going to tell you I need to see the DPW plan, which is what I've said before, in order to make that determination. Happy to come back before this body with that plan and show you what our approach is on that.
It sounds like a lot of your decisions are driven on the dollars that might be in this plan.
No, it's driven by how far behind we are and what the catch-up piece is.
Is there any, I assume that the budget for next year is soon to be released. Are there any heavy vehicles in the capital appropriation?
There's nothing over $100,000 in the DPW appropriation, correct.
Nothing over it. And did you take away the same, from the Board of Finance meeting, the same result that I did, that the Board of Finance was pretty steadfast in their expression that this was a one-off?
I took away from the Board of Finance meeting the same thing that I'm taking away here, that bonding should not be the first choice in any of these decisions and should only be used in an exceptional case. So
okay, and granted that the way they've demonstrated this need, I would agree that this might be an exceptional case that we might go along with to bring our fleet up to date. That would limit me to this year. Going forward, I don't expect this to be a bonding. I expect to see next year in the capital of the budget.
Yeah. Without seeing the plan and seeing how far behind we are and having a formal approach to that, I can't tell you how much catch-up there is to do.
Okay, you're asking a lot to me. You've expressed a need, but we're going to grant you a need with no plan. I really think that this should have been presented in toto, so we had both pieces of the equation. Here I am. I'm forced to approve this because there's been a demonstrated need, but I don't know the future. You got to get on this.
Thank you. And that's why we're putting together a plan, Mr. Bateson, and that's why I asked Mr. Michael Ansel.
Disagree. It should have been, the plan already should have been prepared and presented to this body.
Yeah. And if we had it, it would have been, but it wasn't there before. If we had it, it would have been. It wasn't there before. We're putting it together for the first time.
Representative Braun. Just a reminder that we're discussing tonight the appropriation of the $2.1 million.
I just have two quick points. I might have missed this through you, Madam Moderator, to Mike. Did anyone say when the plan is coming? And I apologize if I missed it. The DPW plan.
We did not. I've asked Joe to put it together. He's been somewhat busy between snow and the budget to get all that done. I would expect it in the next couple months.
Okay, thank you. My next question is this whole thing about the debt service and the waterfall chart. I understand there's a guideline. This is just my comment, or not a question. The guideline 10 to 15%. I don't really necessarily agree with that. We might be within the guideline, but as our budget goes up, then you're just going to keep ratcheting up the amount of debt service we're allowing by allowing more and more capital spending. So I don't necessarily agree that as we spend more, as our budget goes up every year, we should still be allowed to go 10% and put that into the capital budget. I don't think that's a good objective. It just means you're spending more dollars and cents every year by allowing more capital projects, just as our budget goes up.
The way you're describing the math, part of that, you're correct.
Am I right on the math?
You're right on the math.
Thank you.
Okay. We're well under what that guideline is because we're at 8 to 9% versus 10 to 15. We've been over 10.
Yep.
If you've watched the last few years, you've seen our debt service as an absolute number continue to grow.
Correct.
The last 2 years, we've been able to get that to flatten out. So the first thing we wanted to do as part of a financial plan was to keep that, get that debt service number to stop being a big driver for our budget, and we're able to accomplish that this year. So we've been able to flatten that out, and the goal is to kind of either keep it flat or get it to come down a bit. When you bond things over 20 years, it's hard to get that to drop off. You can not do anything, but you still have 20 years' worth of payments to make.
Correct. Thank you very much.
We're trying to manage
that. Okay, thanks.
Any further questions? Representative Ambrose.
Peter Ambrose, District 2. I'm going to support this resolution tonight. I think it's a time to catch up. It's time to make this commitment. I hate bonding it, but we've got to catch up. We've got to put viable vehicles on the road going forward. It's painful. I do agree with Representative Bateson's concern about going forward. I think that future acquisitions hopefully can be put into the operational budget, but I think we've got to move forward and approve this resolution tonight. And I just want to commend Mr. Michelangelo on the wonderful job he's done in such a short time of being here.
Thank you. Any further questions from the members of the body? Comments from the public? Seeing none, we're going to come back to vote. And we're going to vote on item number 10. Shall I read it for you? Thank you. Item number 10 is to vote on $2.13 million for a 10-year bond. Anyone who says yes agrees that's what we're going to do. No, you vote against it. So all in favor of item 10, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. We're going to move on to item number 11. Bless you. Item number 11 is to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Finance. Resolved that the bond resolution entitled "A Resolution Appropriating a Sum Not to Exceed $1,478,766 for the costs of certain non-reoccurring capital projects and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation consisting of 4 pages be and hereby is approved." And that item is the 20-year bond. May I, Representative Schwartz, make motion to discuss?
Madam Moderator, Hal Schwartz, District 7. I'd like to make a motion to separate the items, please. I'd like to take them individually.
Thank you. There's no need for a second, but okay, Representative Bateson. So the first item that we will discuss will be the H. Smith Richardson bunker renovation for $100,000. Are there any questions from the members of the body on that appropriation? Any comments from the public? Representative McKenzie, once I come back from the public, you've had your opportunity, so you lost it. All right, we're moving on to, I'm sorry. Item number 2, the Old Town Hall structural improvement, a $300,000 appropriation. Representative McCarthy.
Tom McCarthy, District 8. I'd like to make a motion to add some additional language specific to the town hall. What I would like to do is add an additional caveat, which would place an additional requirement of one last review by an engineer to effectively ensure that upon execution of this project, it will accommodate and take into consideration any future project now contemplated.
All right, so you want to add that language to the resolution as it was read?
Yes, I do. I understand Representative Ambrose is also looking at the words. If he has additional thoughts, I would yield the floor to him at this time.
Representative Ambrose?
Peter Ambrose, District 2. I'm concerned about modifying the language. I am concerned about the possibility of the contemplation of perhaps modifications, renovations to the town hall. And I was on the visit on Saturday to the town hall, and I feel that these structural renovations have to be made. There's a rather distressful state of affairs with the condition of the basement at the present time. And my concern is if we allocate the amount requested to make these repairs, I don't want to be back here 3 years from now or 2 years from now, only to find that we have to enhance those repairs at additional expense. So I would like to modify the language that prior to any renovations, or rather prior to any expenditures being made, that it be contingent upon the Department of Public Works obtaining an additional engineering evaluation to ensure that the execution of the project will comply with and accommodate any future expansion contemplated. I think that premise will put the onus on the Department of Public Works to assure us that going forward, we're not going to be making another investment into the basement of the existing town hall.
I guess 2 questions. You're talking about modifying the resolution, not the bonding resolution that's attached.
That's correct.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor, if I could, as long as we don't modify the bonding resolution, we just modify the resolution on the agenda, that doesn't cause us any legal problems with the bond, correct? All right, and then second, my question would be to Joe, are we okay, that doesn't complicate things and we're okay with that? All right, and then lastly, Representative Ambrose, if I could, just to be clear, you want us to hire an independent engineer to come back in, sit down with our folks, review what...
And provide an evaluation to ensure us, or the town, that the execution of the project for the repairs going forward will comply with and accommodate any future expansion contemplated.
Okay. Joe, are you clear on that? My concern is about evaluation, Peter. Just what are they evaluating if the other plan is in the concept stages as opposed to in the actual planning stages. So I just want to make sure that when we say yes, we're saying yes to what you want to see.
I believe that those who inspected the town hall basement on Saturday were somewhat surprised at the amount of electrical work, the amount of other work that has to be affected by any renovations. There's and I think that we want to make sure that this $300,000 that's going to be provided to do this is going to, in fact, encompass the full project of the basement, so we don't have to spend more money going forward. So obviously, the structural integrity is the most important thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that has to be addressed.
All right, and then I'm just going to go to Ms. Michelangelo. Joe, does that tell you enough so you can say yes to that?
Yes.
All right. Peter, is that okay?
That's fine with me.
How do we communicate back the evaluation, or how do we confirm to you that we did it?
Well, I think it may very well be possible for Mr. Michelangelo to provide us with a report from the surveyor, the engineer that's going to do the structural engineer that's going to do the survey.
Okay.
And I feel confident that if he provides that to the RTM, I think we should be satisfied.
Is that okay, Joe? All right.
Representative Ambrose, could you just reread the resolution as you amended it?
I would like to insert the words contingent upon the use of said funds will be contingent upon the Department of Public Works obtaining an independent engineering evaluation to ensure that the execution of the project will comply with and accommodate any future expansion contemplated.
All right, that has been amended. Can I have a second to the amendment? Representative Hurley? All right, discussion on the amendment. Representative Palmer?
Joe Palmer, District 4, through you, Madam Moderator, to the First Selectman. I was hoping we can maybe take a step back here. I think the public at home, maybe people in the audience might be a little bit clueless at this point with this overall picture that we're talking about with the town hall. So we have a $300,000 appropriation that's going to fix the structural integrity of the building. We also have potentially another appropriation of $250,000 next year for design plans, and then maybe 2 years out a appropriation for the full funding. Can you take us through the vision here with what we're trying to accomplish? We understand the structural component, but what are we looking to do with the town hall, and how is that all going to play out in the next few years for us?
Yeah, simply put, we've got, Joe, a 200-year-old building? Okay, in Old Town Hall. And just to be clear to anybody, we have the new Town Hall, or Sullivan Independence Hall, that's kind of in back. The structure that you see on the corner of Beach Road and the Old Post Road, affectionately known as the Old Town Hall, is the structure we're talking about. The item that's before this body right now is the structural support and repair to the floor area in the lobby as you walk in. I guess on my rough analysis of that, or rough description of that, would be the floor area between the tax collector's office and the tax assessor's office. All right, the members that were able to tour on Saturday had a chance to view the basement, as it were, or the crawl space. This building has been modified. I don't know how to say, I'm going to say updated, but we all know it's not updated. And that we've reached the point from a working efficiency standpoint, ADA access standpoint, that we need to take a long look at this. And as you saw from the floor being, or the underpinnings being an example, the building's old, and it's showing its age. So the next step is to bring in an architect to take a look at the building, see how we can improve it, modify it, kind of bring it up to current building codes and standards as best we can, within the constraints of the fact that it is a historic structure in the historic district. So whatever we do, it also have to go through the Historic District Commission. All right, we expect that overall renovation of the building to be a much larger dollar amount and take a much longer period of time. This is kind of immediate repairs necessary to keep the building safe and functioning for our employees and our citizens.
Have we begun to contemplate what that building, what the inside might look like, be used for? Would the, space be, be utilized differently? Is there a plan, or is it just really we're in the early stages?
At this point, we haven't gone down, assessed the needs, and taken time to go much further than the concept. At this point, there's enough things that need to be addressed that this is the time to put them all on the table and look at the whole building.
Okay. So, just having taken the tour, I find that it's going to be incredibly challenging to do all of this work without dealing with the mechanicals, the electric, plumbing. It's a mess down there. The work obviously needs to be done, but I think there might be a better plan that I'm not going to be proposing here, but to shore up the building, there's already some temporary structures put in place to shore it up, and go ahead and begin that architectural phase where we start to look at that vision. And so I'm having a difficult time supporting this this strategy, and but again, the necessity's there. I think that's, this amendment had come up, and I don't know if it was framed in that way, that there is this long-term plan in place for it. And I think there's just anxiety that people have about how it's going to be unfolding, and are we going to be throwing good money after bad? And that's really...
Yeah, I think that two thoughts. One is that certainly our DPW director has described that this won't impact or be impacted by the overall renovation. But then the other piece is that the extent that you have some thoughts on structurally how to shore this up that might help us get through this process quicker, I'm sure Joe would like to hear those.
I have been watching this old house, so I have some ideas.
All right. We're on the amendment. Questions on the amendment. Representative Iacono.
Pamela Iacono, District 9. I appreciate Representative Ambrose's amendment, and I will be supporting it. I was very concerned, again, I'll go back to long-term planning and how this all fits in. I don't want us taking a Band-Aid approach to our town facilities. This is clearly a very demonstrated need. It's a safety need. It's a big concern. It needs to get done. But I just want to echo the sentiments of other representatives who have spoken, and I don't want to see us do something only to have to come in and redo it again. I want to know that through the moderator to the first selectman, that you do have on your mind space planning and where we will be in the future for our town hall facilities as it relates to them throughout the entire district, and that includes some of the auxiliary buildings that you have, for example, at the senior center.
Most definitely. If you realize one of the things that town has done in the last 2 years, we did follow the Board of Ed example and actually put together a comprehensive plan. We did not have that until 2 years ago. Right? So when you look at the waterfall chart, when you look at the associated documentations, you can see each of the facilities. One of my requests to every department head was to make sure that we got every single town building owned, leased, anything we're involved in, and it's an amazing number, on our capital plan so we can see that coming through. So there are a number of things we're starting to look at that may be popping up and saying it's new, but it's because we didn't have it on the plan before. There wasn't a plan till I got here and asked the folks to put it together, because you can't have capital plan without the facilities plan to go along with it, as you well know from your time on the Board of Ed.
Exactly.
We have tied it in with the dollars, or at least anticipated dollars, so that we can manage our debt service and bonding over time to get that done. So absolutely.
Do you have a booklet or a report, or is there somewhere we can access online what all of those different spaces are, and then what your estimated costs or plans are? Is there a resource we can go to outside of the waterfall chart?
Not, at this point, not beyond the documentation in the waterfall chart. We don't quite have the staff that the Board of Ed does to put all that stuff together, nor do we have the color printers, so our stuff comes out in black and white. However, we hope someday to have that staff so we can do that.
Mr. First Selectman, if you put a color printer in your budget, I promise not to cut it.
Thank you. That's one. Do I have 49 others?
Got to get through the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance first. I would just like to make that request that you start to look at that, and that you look and ask your staff to do that with the staff that you do have, and start to make that a priority, because it will be a lot easier for us to make those appropriations, seeing and knowing how they fit into everything.
No question. That's why
I'm not really sure we need to add head count to do that, but you and I can beg to differ on that, but thank you very much.
Maybe we can borrow some of the Board of Ed staff. But that's why we put
I don't
the
think we
capital
need to
plan
take it out
together,
of there either,
and
but
that's why
thank
we
you.
put the facilities plan in place with all of that, so we can manage those costs and at least start to get that picture down the road. And as you know, that's put together for the next 20 years.
Okay, Representative Schwartz, I'm just going to remind everybody, it's 10:30. We need to vote on the amendment before we can go back to discussing the 6 items on this.
I have just one quick question through you, Madam Moderator, to Mr. Michelangelo. The number is $300,000. Now we're going to ask you to spend additional funds for an independent engineer. My concern is now how much money does that take away from the money we were going to spend to fix the building, and now are we going to be short because we want an independent engineer? So I'm a little concerned. I understand where you're coming from, but if we come up short, then I don't get to finish the project, and that's just because we have an independent. So I'm a little concerned with the numbers and where they're going to be, and if you're comfortable enough with the $300,000 number to make sure that we're going to have both.
In the $300,000 capital request, there was some contingency in there for construction. I believe it was on the order of about 30 or 40,000. So there is contingency based on, in that, in the estimate. And, some of the questions we had obviously was marrying, this project with the other project. So yes, this is simply a structural engineer project who will go in there and structurally build the building. But I would estimate that the cost of the overall scope, so we'll get an architect involved to say conceptually, here's what we're going to do. The plans, the future plans for the building, does this tie our hands, restrict us in any way? And I think that we could probably get that done in several $1,000s, so I don't see it breaking the project.
Yeah. If I might just confirm on that, I believe the wording of the amendment says before any of those dollars are spent, that evaluation has to be done. So the question really is, do you have money elsewhere to get that evaluation done?
Yeah, we could take it out of operating budget for that. But yeah, that is a good point, because it is a little tricky. If we do get somebody to, the person that's evaluating it has to prepare a plan. So it's almost, we have to get a little ways into it before he could review it.
All right. Joe, given where we are, why don't you and I sit down, review the contingency, and see what the options are.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions on the amendment? Any questions? Any comments from the body, from the public? All right. I'm going to read the resolution with the amended language. All right. Resolved that the bond resolution entitled a resolution appropriating a sum not to exceed $1,478,766 for the costs of certain non-reoccurring capital projects, and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation, consisting of 4 pages, be and hereby is approved, contingent upon the Department of Public Works obtaining an additional engineering evaluation to ensure that the execution of the project will comply and accommodate any further expansion contemplated. No, sorry. This, as I understand that, this language is being added only to accommodate the concerns of item number 2, the $300,000 appropriation. No, it's not.
The wording of the amendment is merely to address the $300,000 request for the funds to be used for the Old Town Hall.
Yep. Yep. All right, Peter, I'm going to ask that we insert contingent upon the Department of Public Works obtaining an additional engineering evaluation to ensure that the execution of the project at Old Town Hall will comply with and accommodate any further expansion contemplated.
That's perfect.
Okay. All in favor of the amendment as read, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Now, back to item number 2, $300,000. Any further questions or comments on the $300,000 for the Old Town Hall project? All right. Members of the public? Thank you. Item number 3, which is the Fairfield Center Streetscape project for the appropriation of $100,000. Questions? Representative Iacono.
Pamela Iacono, District 9. Madam Moderator, I move to reduce this item by $100,000 and eliminate this project.
Second, Representative Meyer. Discussion on the amendment.
The reason why I'm putting this forward, it's not that I don't think that we need to do it, it's not that I don't think it's an important project, but I just don't think that this is an item that needs to be bonded. I see it as a beautification project. I thought the DPW did a good job explaining it as a separate project, but I still fundamentally have a serious problem with bonding sidewalks, even if they're special sidewalks with brick inlays. I think this is something that needs to be planned for. It needs to be in our operating budget, and this is something that needs to be rolled forward on a regular basis and not added to our future debt. So I am asking that we remove this one project from the appropriation.
Any further questions, comments on the reduction?
If I might, this was added in. We normally have $80,000 to $100,000 in our operating budget for sidewalks. This was added in as a specific amount to address some serious concerns. For those of you that have walked downtown Fairfield, the sidewalks are in really bad shape. So this is not about beautification so much as it is safety issues. What's happened is over time, the $80,000 to $100,000 we typically put in the budget has gotten drained to downtown rather than addressing some of the other areas throughout town that also need help. All right. This piece, frankly, addressing the, Joe, that's 15%, 15% of the downtown, the worst areas. Guys, this will pay for itself in legal fees. What you're not seeing is the number of slip and falls we get because of the shape the sidewalks are in. All right. Meanwhile, we're holding sidewalk sale days, restaurant week, Memorial Day parades, shop and stroll in the winter. All right. We're trying to bring more people to downtown Fairfield. All right. So we can be penny wise and pound foolish is how we approach this in terms of what takes place. So that would be my caution for your consideration.
Yeah, Representative Iacono.
If that's the case, and I don't doubt that it is, then this is something that, again, we need to plan for, and it needs to be on our operating budget. And if $80,000 for general sidewalk maintenance won't cut it throughout the town, and you need an additional $100,000 to do the town stuff, then I believe that this appropriation should be coming through in the operating budget at your full request for $180,000, and then the bodies can decide which sidewalks, or not which sidewalks, that's up to the DPW, but how it wants to be allocated. And there can be a determination on what we want to spend on sidewalks. I just don't think that this is something that should be bonded.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the member? Representative Garskoff. We're talking about a reduction of $100,000.
Josh Garskoff, District 5. So if we did take this out tonight, is there a mechanism to put it into the budget at this stage? And so what would be the next step?
It would have to be added into the budget by the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance.
And if it was not added in, then how would you solve, maybe this is for Mr. Michelangelo, if you don't mind, Madam Moderator, where would the 80,000, how would you accommodate the needs for downtown and the rest of the town if you didn't get this?
Now, the way we have been addressing our sidewalks is through about 80 to 100,000 in our operating budget. And what that does is we invariably spend, a disproportionate amount of that in the downtown area, not just because there's a lot of sidewalks there, but and the amount of pedestrian traffic, but also it's more of an expensive treatment with the wider sidewalks, wider all concrete, wider sidewalks, brick pavers, tree grates, so there's a lot involved as opposed to a 5-foot concrete or asphalt sidewalk in another town. So what we do is, out of the 80,000 that we hopefully get in the operating budget, there's probably a 40% of that, say, will be for the downtown area, and it'll leave the remainder of the funds to cover the other 100-plus miles of sidewalk in all other areas.
And Joe, if I might just expand on that with you, we've got about 110 miles of sidewalks in town. I've asked Joe to put together a plan with his department for how to kind of go through those and progressively do that, much like we do with our 270 miles of roads. All right. But for any of you who've walked downtown, it's a serious issue. All right. And especially for our seniors that aren't as comfortable walking and maybe short on balance, for anybody who's if you've walked downtown, and Joe, Mark Barnhart, Bill Hurley, and I did, we walked from Beach Road down to St. Thomas Church on one side, then came back on the other side. There's not a lot of good sidewalk pieces there. And I'm not saying the sidewalk in the rest of the town, in many cases, is in better shape. There's a lot of problems throughout. But we've spent the last 25 years without an annual maintenance program to address our sidewalk issues, and we're now suffering at the back end of that 25-year period.
Thank you. So it sounds like you're saying you would do some downtown and some around. Basically, you'd short what you'd like to do in both cases. You'd do less downtown and less around town if you didn't get this.
Correct. So that has been our approach. So we do what we have been doing over the years, which has led to the condition downtown.
Representative Dean.
Representative Dean, District 4. I don't really like bonding sidewalks either. In fact, I was a supporter of moving paving out of bonding. I've been on this body for 10 years, and I'm very glad that we've done that. I don't like cutting paving either, and this body has done that in the past, much to my dismay. I don't know about you folks, but I'm getting inundated with emails and phone calls from snow that hasn't been removed, and corners that haven't been cleared, and I'm seeing big machines coming in and moving some snow and not so much snow. But the point is, I don't know when this snow melts what it's going to look like. And every other part of town that has sidewalks, including in front of my house and my neighbor's house. So I'm a little reluctant about cutting any kind of bonding right now with regards to the downtown and having it somehow come out of the operating budget when we still need to see how our sidewalks are going to look after all the snow and ice melts. So I will not be supporting this cut. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions from the members of the body? Representative Jacob.
Ellen Jacob, District 9. Just wanted to add to the streetscape discussion. I believe in our hearings, we were told that we have 2 grants that are going to help out with part of our streetscape up to Thorpe Street and our Sherman Green streetscape. So we will be doing those, and they are partially reimbursed or maybe mostly reimbursed. And then we have a capital project, a streetscape one on Kings Highway East, coming up in your waterfall for this year for $1,200,000, if I'm... We're state funded for that? Okay, okay. So but we do have a lot of that work going on, and some of it, thank heavens, is covered by funding. So I'm wondering also if we can't absorb part of this in the operating budget. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from members of the body? I just want everybody to be aware that it's now 11:15. And we may have to entertain a motion to continue to do business after that time. Any questions from the member of the public? Seeing none, we're going to vote on the amended motion to reduce this appropriation by $100,000 to remove the streetscape project. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Let's see. Ambrose, Garskoff, Zezima, you're going to test me at this time. Marmion, Gottlieb, Schwartz, Gerber, Hopkins, Marks, Devlin, McCardle, sister of McCardle. Where are we? Representative Braun, in the back, Waldron, Smay, McCarthy, Schindler, DiMartino, Walk, Eric Newman, thank you very much, Phil Pierce, O'Brien, Hochberg, and Dean, Hurley, McCullough. We got it? Abstentions. The item passes 25-21. All right, next item on the topic for discussion is Mill Hill Elementary partial roof replacement, an appropriation of $461,614. Representative Schwartz.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Hal Schwartz, District 7. I'm not sure whether this would be, I'm certain, to Mr. Cullen. The question I have through you, Madam Moderator, to Mr. Cullen is partial roof replacement for $461,000. It just sounds like a lot of money to me to replace a partial roof. I'm just wondering if we're going to bond this, and did we look at the cost to replace the entire roof and what the difference in the cost would be if we were going to replace the entire roof? And if we're not, how much more of a partial roof are we going to have to do over the next 3 or 4 years? So, Dr. Title, thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm not Tom Cullen. We have 4 sections of the roof, I guess is a better way to think of it, rather than a partial roof. 4 sections of the roof, warranty, that section of the roof, warranties expired 10 years ago. The rest of the roof is in perfectly good condition. The warranties don't expire until 2017. In order to get state reimbursement for the project, you have to replace a roof after the warranty has expired. And so we're replacing, a designated section of the roof that's of a certain age and is failing. The rest of the roof is perfectly fine, is not in need of replacement, will not be in need of replacement for at least 3 or 4 more years. And if the town chose to replace it now, would not receive any state reimbursement for the project of approximately 26%. Therefore, we limited it to this scope.
Any other questions on the Mill Hill roof replacement? Seeing none, members of the public? Next item. North Stratfield Elementary, 2 boiler replacements, an appropriation of $364,652. Pardon me? Oh, town clerk has an adjustment she'd like to. The item failed, 2125. Thank you. Yes. All right, before we do have to go back for to discussion because the item failed. I would like to entertain a motion to suspend the rules of item 36 so we can take up new business after 11. Representative Garskoff, all in favor? Say aye. Opposed? Thank you. All right. Back to item number 3, which is Fairfield Center Streetscape for $100,000. It does sound like a Jeopardy category. All right. Any further conversation about the appropriation of $100,000? Seeing none, I'm going to move on. No, not yet. We vote we go to item. Dr. Title, item number 5, North Stratfield Elementary 2 boiler replacements. Again, $364,652 appropriation. Any questions from the members of the Board of Education on this appropriation? Seeing none. Comments from the public? Seeing none, we're going to move on to item number 6, which is the Fairfield Ward High School boiler replacement for $152,500. Any questions from the members of the body on this item? Seeing none. Any comments from the public? All right. Now we're back to voting on the main motion, the appropriation of $1,478,766. I think we'll do a voice vote. All in favor? No, we're doing a voice vote. Roll call. Would you call the roll? Roll call vote. I'm so sorry. John Donovan. All right, let me just rephrase. We are now voting on the resolution to appropriate $1,478,766. A yes vote means you approve that appropriation. A no vote means you do not approve. The clerk will now call the roll.
John Donovan. Yes. Michael Hurley.
Yes.
Gaylord Meyer. Yes. Eric Sloneman. Yes. Pete Ambrose.
Yes.
Catherine Burstein. Yes. Nathan Schindler.
Yes.
Ed Basin.
Yes.
Laura Devlin. Yes. Hank Barron.
Yes.
Dave McKenzie.
Yes.
Mary McCullough.
Yes.
Heather Dean. Yes. Joe DiMartino. Bill Gerber. Joe Palmer. Cindy Waldron. Bill D'Amica. You didn't tell me. Josh Garskoff. Lauren O'Brien. Ruth Smay. Carol Way. Julie Gottlieb. Alan Marks. Sheila Marmion. Jay Wolk. Liz Zezima. Jen Hochberg. Kevin Hopkins. Eric Newman. Phil Pierce. Hal Schwartz. Kathy Braun. Alex Durrell. Jason Lee. Tom McCarthy. Jeff Millerano. Pam Iacono. Ellen Jacob. Laura McCardle. Carol Pontrelli. Chris Timniak. Brian Caffarelli. Not here. Brian Farnan.
Looks like he excused.
Ray Newberger. Bill Perugini. Bruce Ryan.
The item passes. Thank you. Now, just a few thank you very much, each and every one of you, for your attention. I know this was a long night, but I have a couple of housekeeping things that I just want to make sure that you know. Tomorrow night, you all received a memo from Mark Barnhart. Tomorrow night is the public hearing at the Old Town Hall on the second floor at 6 o'clock. And there are Board of Education budget books at the front of the room. If you have not picked up your book, please do so before you leave this evening. So anybody who has not, on the community block grant, you received a memo at home. Okay, I just wanted to remind you that it's available tomorrow. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Chris Timniak, Heather Dean. Thank you all very much.